Chapter 7. The Assassin's Strike. The room was dim, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows across the walls. Eldrin's breathing was laboured, each shallow breath sending a sharp stab of pain through his side where the assassin's dagger had struck. His hand pressed firmly against the hastily bandaged wound. The blood was already soaking through, seeping between his fingers. Anna knelt beside him, her face tight with concern as she worked to rewrap the bandage. "Stay still, damn it!" she muttered under her breath. "You're bleeding worse than you think." Eldrin's jaw clenched, his teeth gritting against the pain. "I don't have time to stay still," he whispered through ragged breaths. "We need to make sure." "We're not going anywhere until you stop bleeding," Anna interrupted, her tone sharp but laced with worry. "That bastard nearly gutted you." Ruck hovered near the window, his wide goblin eyes darting between Anna's frantic hands and the alley below. He stood on his toes, peeking through the cracked curtain. "Bad people outside," he whispered, glancing back at Eldrin. "Lots of shadows moving. Ruck doesn't like it." Eldrin sucked in a sharp breath, the pain making his vision swim for a moment. His voice trembled, more from the blood loss than fear. If they find us, the book, it'll be over." Anna's hands froze mid-rap, and she looked at him, her gaze dark and serious. "The book?" Eldrin nodded, biting back another wave of pain. "It's hidden. In my room above the stable. I don't know if they've found it yet." Anna cursed under her breath, tightening the bandage with more force than necessary, causing Eldrin to wince. "And you didn't think to mention that the book they're after was hidden in a place they could easily get to?" Eldrin's lips curled in a strained grimace. "Didn't think they'd find me this quickly." "Well, they did." Anna snapped, tying off the bandage and pulling him upright by the arm. "You're lucky I was here when that assassin attacked, or you'd be lying dead on the floor next to him." Eldrin leaned against her, his head spinning, the room swaying slightly as he struggled to stay upright. "We need to check," he gasped. "If they've taken it—" "Damn it, Eldrin, you can barely stand." Anna's voice was harsh, but beneath it there was a crack of fear. "You need healing, not a book." "We don't have time for healing," Eldrin argued, though his voice was weaker than he wanted it to be. "The book contains everything about Shakar, the prison, the orb. If they've got it, they'll know too much." Ruck scuttled back to them, eyes wide with concern. "More shadows outside," he whispered urgently. Ruck seized them, moving closer. Anna's expression darkened. She sheathed her sword with a sharp movement. "Fine, but if we're doing this, we do it fast. You're in no condition for this, Eldrin." He gave her a strained nod, his vision blurring for a moment as he forced himself to move. "I'll manage." Anna stood and slung Eldrin's arm over her shoulder, helping him to his feet as they made their way toward the door. "Ruck, keep watch. If you see anything, you tell us immediately." Ruck nodded quickly, slipping back to the window, his small form nearly invisible in the shadows. "Ruck will watch. Ruck keeps eyes open." The world swam slightly in front of Eldrin, his feet unsteady as they moved. His wound burned, and his head felt light, like it might float away from his body at any moment. But the thought of the book, his master's notes on Shakar, the cryptic warnings about the obsidian orb, kept him focused. Whoever wanted that knowledge would stop at nothing to erase it, and they would come for him again if they hadn't already found it. "We shouldn't fight if we don't have to," Eldrin muttered, his voice faint. "We need to get out of town after we check." "I'll do the fighting if it comes to that," Anna replied curtly, her voice tense. "You just focus on staying conscious. If you pass out, I'm not dragging you out of here." Eldrin managed a weak smile, though his grip on her shoulder tightened as his legs wavered. "I'll try not to." Anna's eyes flicked to the door as she adjusted her hold on him. "We need to move quietly. They'll be searching the streets." Ruck peeked through the curtain again, his voice a soft hiss. "Shadows getting closer. Ruck doesn't like this." Anna swore under her breath again. "We're running out of time. Eldrin, if you're going to do this, do it now." Eldrin took a deep breath, steadying himself against the wall. His hand still pressed firmly against his wound. His heart pounded in his chest, but he nodded. "Let's go." Chapter 8. The Missing Book. Eldrin leaned heavily on Anna as they crept through the dim hallway of the inn, the walls seeming to close in with each step. His breath came in shallow, ragged bursts, each inhale sending a sharp pain through the wound in his side. The bandage Anna had wrapped around him was already damp with fresh blood, but there was no time to stop. Shadows were moving outside, closing in on them, and the more immediate danger weighed heavily on his mind. "We need to move faster," Anna whispered, her voice tense but steady. "Those people outside will catch up with us if we linger." Eldrin grimaced, clutching his side tighter as he forced himself forward. "I need to check. The book," he gasped. "It's hidden, in my room, above the stable." Anna shot him a concerned glance, the flicker of nearby candlelight revealing the tightness around her eyes. "You're in no shape for this," she said, her voice low but urgent. "You should be resting." "I don't have a choice," Eldrin replied through gritted teeth. "If the book's gone, it's already too late." Ruck scuttled ahead of them, his wide goblin eyes darting nervously as he scanned the hallways. His small body was tense with worry. "Ruck sees bad people outside," he whispered over his shoulder. "They're looking for us." "Then we'll go the back way," Anna said firmly. "We'll take the alley behind the inn and head straight for your room." Eldrin could only nod weakly. The pain in his side blurred the edges of his vision, but the thought of the missing book kept him focused. His mind raced as they neared the rear of the inn, the smell of cooking meat and stale ale drifting through the air as they passed the kitchens. The sounds of the inn, laughter, conversation, the clinking of mugs, seemed to fade behind them, and they slipped out through the back door unnoticed. The cool night air hit them as they stepped into the alley behind the inn. The moon was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the narrow streets. The stable where Eldrin rented his room was just ahead, its dark outline looming against the starry sky. A small wooden staircase led up the side of the stable to a narrow door above. Eldrin's sanctuary. "Almost there," Anna whispered, glancing around cautiously. "Stay low and stay quiet." Ruck scurried ahead, leading them through the winding alleyways, his small feet padding softly on the cobblestone. The town of Eastmere was eerily quiet at this hour, the streets empty save for the occasional rustle of wind against the buildings. But Eldrin knew the danger wasn't far behind. Whoever was hunting them would be relentless. They reached the base of the wooden staircase, and Anna paused to scan the surrounding area one last time. "All clear," she said softly, though her hand remained tightly around the hilt of her sword. "Let's get inside." Ruck darted up the stairs, his small frame barely making a sound as he reached the top. Eldrin followed, his legs heavy beneath him, the pain in his side threatening to pull him down. He clutched the railing tightly, his breath coming in short gasps. Anna stayed close behind him, her hand ready to steady him if he faltered. When they reached the door, Eldrin fumbled with the key, his hands trembling as he slid it into the lock. The door creaked open, and they slipped inside, closing it quietly behind them. The room was small and dimly lit, a single candle on the desk casting faint shadows across the walls. Eldrin's heart pounded in his chest as he looked around, his eyes immediately drawn to the corner of the room where the wall met the floor. The stone. Eldrin motioned toward the window, his breath still ragged. "Close the curtains," he whispered, his voice tight with urgency. Ruck was quick to obey, scrambling to the window and pulling the thick curtains shut, thus sealing off any view from the outside. The room fell into near-total darkness, the only light coming from the flickering candle on the desk. Anna helped Eldrin to the corner of the room, her arm steadying him as he knelt down beside the wall. His hands trembled as they traced the familiar outline of the loose stone where the wall met the floor. It was subtle, barely noticeable unless you knew where to look, but he had found it months ago when he first rented the room. The cavity beneath had been the perfect hiding place for his most valuable possession. "The book is hidden under this stone," Eldrin murmured, his voice strained with both pain and fear. "If it's still here, we might have a chance." Anna crouched beside him, her eyes narrowing as she watched him carefully remove the stone. "Let's hope they haven't found it yet." With a sharp intake of breath, Eldrin slipped his fingers into the narrow gap where the stone met the floor. The stone was heavier than it looked, and Eldrin's weakened body struggled to lift it at first. He gritted his teeth, fighting through the pain in his side as he pried the stone free and set it aside. Beneath the stone was a small hollow cavity, the perfect hiding spot. Eldrin's hand reached into the hollow space, but his fingers touched nothing but cold, empty air. His heart sank. He frantically searched the cavity, his hands scraping against the stone, his breath catching in his throat. "It's gone," Eldrin whispered, his voice shaking. "The book, it's gone." Anna's face darkened, her expression hardening as the realization hit her. "Gone? Are you sure?" "I hid it here myself," Eldrin said, his voice hoarse. "No one should have known about it. I thought." He trailed off, his mind spinning with the implications. Someone had known. Someone had found the book. Anna stood up, pacing the small room as she tried to process the new threat. "If they've taken the book, they already know more than we do. Whoever's after you must have known it was here." Eldrin sat back against the wall, his legs trembling beneath him. "They have everything. My master's notes, the research on Shakar, the obsidian orb. If they know how to use that knowledge, they'll be able to undo everything," Anna finished, her voice grim. "The prison, Shakar, they'll know how to free him." Eldrin felt a wave of nausea wash over him. The missing book was more than just a collection of notes. It held the key to unravelling the delicate balance that had kept Shakar imprisoned for centuries. If the enemy knew how to weaken the prison, it could mean disaster. "We can't stay here," Eldrin muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "If they've taken the book, they'll come for me next." Anna stopped pacing, her eyes locking with Eldrin's. "You're in no condition to run, Eldrin." "We don't have a choice." Eldrin replied, his voice tight with pain. "They won't stop until they've erased every trace of the book, and of me." Ruck, who had been nervously shifting near the window, suddenly darted over to the curtain and peeked outside. His eyes widened in alarm as he pulled back from the window. "Shadows!" he hissed, his voice trembling. "Bad people. They're getting closer." Anna's hand went to her sword, her eyes narrowing. "We need to go, now." Eldrin struggled to his feet, clutching his side as the pain flared up again. His vision swam for a moment, but he forced himself to focus. "We'll take the back alleys." Ruck glanced nervously toward the door. "Ruck doesn't like this. Bad people everywhere." Eldrin nodded weakly. "We don't have a choice." Anna moved quickly to his side, steadying him as they made their way toward the door. "We'll stay low, stay quiet. If we can get out of town, we might still have a chance." Eldrin took a deep breath, trying to steel himself against the pain. The loss of the book, the knowledge it contained, it weighed on him like a physical burden. But they had to keep moving. If they stayed, they were as good as dead. Rook scurried ahead, opening the door and peeking outside into the dark alley beyond. No bad people here. Not yet. Eldrin glanced once more at the empty cavity where the book had been hidden. The cold realization that they were now one step behind their enemies sank in, but there was no time to dwell on it. "Let's go," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Chapter 9, The Church of Sanctuary. Eldrin leaned heavily on Anna as they navigated the dark alleys of Eastmere. His breath came in short, ragged bursts, each inhale sending sharp pain through the wound in his side. Blood seeped through the bandage Anna had wrapped hastily back in the stable, and his legs felt like they could give out at any moment. Still, Eldrin pushed forward, even though he knew the shadows were closing in. "We need to leave the city," Eldrin muttered, his voice strained and weak. "We can't stay. The shadows, they're hunting us." Anna's grip on his arm tightened. "No," she said firmly, her tone brooking no argument. "You're too weak to make it far. If we try to run now, you'll bleed out before we even reach the edge of Eastmere." Eldrin tried to protest, but the intensity in Anna's eyes silenced him. "I know someone who can help," she continued. "There's a church nearby. The priest there is an old friend of mine. He'll heal you, and we'll figure out our next move after that." Ruck, darting ahead of them like a nervous shadow, skittered back. His goblin eyes were wide with alarm. "Bad people moving," he whispered. "Ruck doesn't like it. They're looking for us." Eldrin clenched his jaw, his mind racing despite his body's weakening state. He wanted to argue, to tell Anna they needed to leave the town and get far away, but the stabbing pain in his side was relentless. He knew Anna was right. He wasn't strong enough to make it out of Eastmere like this. "Fine," Eldrin muttered through gritted teeth, though the frustration was clear in his voice. "But we can't stay long." Anna nodded, but her expression softened. "We won't. Just trust me. Stay close." With that, Anna led them deeper into the twisting alleyways, the cold night air biting at their skin. They moved quietly through the deserted streets, keeping to the shadows, their ears pricked for any sign of movement. Eastmere felt oppressive, as if the city itself was aware of the danger lurking in its streets. Every creak, every distant footstep seemed amplified in the tense silence. Ruck darted ahead, his small frame almost invisible in the darkness. Every so often he would wave them forward, his eyes scanning for threats as he scurried between the dark corners and narrow alleyways. Eldrin tried to stay focused, but with each passing minute his vision blurred, and the pain in his side worsened. His breath came in shallow gasps, and his steps faltered. Anna stayed close, her arm steadying him when his legs threatened to buckle beneath him. "We're almost there," she whispered, her eyes scanning the rooftops and streets. "Just hold on a little longer." Eldrin grunted in response, his mind more focused on keeping his legs moving than on anything else. His thoughts were muddled with pain, but he couldn't shake the gnawing feeling of dread. The book was gone, and whoever had taken it would be after him next. They were already too late. Suddenly, Ruck came skidding to a halt, his hand raised in warning. He pressed himself flat against the wall of a nearby building, his eyes wide with alarm. "Shadows," he hissed. "Bad people coming." Anna's hand immediately went to her sword, and she pulled Eldrin into the shadows of a nearby alcove, pressing him against the cold stone wall. Her grip on his arm was firm, steadying him as they crouched low. Eldrin's breathing was shallow, and he fought to keep quiet, every movement sending fresh pain through his body. His heart raced, not just from the wound, but from the growing realization that they were being hunted. Whoever was after them wouldn't stop until they found him. Whatever he read in that book, these shadows didn't want getting out. Footsteps echoed down the street, and from the corner of his eye, Eldrin saw shadowy figures moving between the buildings. Their movements were slow, deliberate. They were searching. Anna tensed beside him, her eyes following the figures as they crept closer. Ruck crouched nearby, his small form barely visible in the darkness, his goblin ears twitching with every sound. The silence was suffocating, and Eldrin's heart pounded in his chest. For a moment, he feared they would be discovered. His hand instinctively went to his staff, but the pain in his side made him falter. His vision swam, and he nearly let out a gasp of pain, but Anna's hand covered his mouth before any sound could escape. She shot him a warning look, her eyes hard with intensity. The shadowy figures paused, their heads turning as if listening for something. Eldrin's breath caught in his throat, and the seconds seemed to stretch on endlessly. Then, just as quickly as they had appeared, the figures moved on, disappearing into the night. Anna exhaled softly, her hand slipping from Eldrin's mouth. "They're gone," she whispered. "But they'll be back. We need to keep moving." Ruck, still crouched low, looked up at them. Ruck saw more shadows down the big road. "We need to hurry." Anna nodded and helped Eldrin to his feet, though his legs felt like lead. He leaned heavily on her, his breath shallow and laboured. They continued through the alleys, moving as quickly as Eldrin's condition would allow. Each step sent another wave of pain through his body, but the flickering light of the church in the distance gave him a small spark of hope. The church loomed ahead of them, its simple stone structure bathed in the faint glow of candlelight. The wooden door was slightly ajar, and Eldrin could hear the faint sound of soft chanting from inside. Anna helped Eldrin up the stone steps, her grip firm as she guided him toward the door. She pushed it open, and they slipped inside the small sanctuary, the warmth of the church washing over them as they stepped into the candlelit room. The scent of burning incense and old wood filled the air. Inside, rows of wooden pews lined the room, leading to a small altar at the far end. Kneeling near the altar was an elderly cleric, his weathered face illuminated by the soft glow of the candles. His hands moved slowly as he adjusted the candles for the evening prayers, but he turned at the sound of the door creaking open. The priest's eyes widened in surprise when he saw Anna. "Anna?" he asked, his voice filled with both disbelief and familiarity. Anna gently lowered Eldrin onto one of the pews before turning to the priest. "Father Brannan," she said, her voice soft but urgent. "We need your help. My friend here, he's been wounded. Badly." Father Brannan hurried over, his expression darkening as he saw Eldrin's pale face and blood-soaked bandage. "By the gods," he muttered, kneeling beside Eldrin to examine the wound. "What happened?" An assassin, Anna said, her voice tight with frustration. There are more people looking for us. We can't stay long, but Eldrin won't make it much further unless you help him. The old cleric frowned deeply but nodded. I'll do what I can, he said, his hands already glowing with the soft light of healing magic. But this wound is deep. He'll need time to recover. Anna glanced toward the door, her hand resting on her sword. We don't have time, Father. We just need the healing. Then we'll figure out the rest. Father Brannan's expression grew even more serious as he placed his glowing hands over Eldrin's wound. This isn't the first time I've patched you up, Anna, he said, his voice kind but firm. But you always seem to find trouble wherever you go. Anna managed a small smile, though her eyes remained fixed on Eldrin's wound. Seems that way, doesn't it? Father Brannan focused on his work, his hands moving gently over the wound as he chanted softly under his breath. The warmth of the healing magic spread through Eldrin's body, dulling the pain and easing the tension in his muscles. For the first time in what felt like hours, he could breathe without sharp agony cutting through his chest. You've been through worse, Anna, Father Brannan said quietly as he worked. I remember that time on the western roads when your whole party was brought to me after that ambush. Anna chuckled softly, though there was little humour in her voice. I owe you for that. Father Brannan shook his head. You owe me nothing. I'm just glad I'm here to help. After several long moments, the glow from Father Brannan's hands faded, and he sat back, wiping the sweat from his brow. That should stop the bleeding, he said, though his tone was sombre. But you'll need to rest, Eldrin. You'll also be hungry. Eldrin exhaled slowly, his body sagging with relief as the pain dulled to a manageable throb. Thank you, he muttered, though his thoughts were still tangled with worry. The missing book, the shadowy pursuers, it all weighed heavily on his mind. You're safe here, Father Brannan said gently. At least for tonight. I'll keep watch while you rest. Anna nodded, though her expression remained tense. Thank you, Brannan, she said, but once Eldrin's strong enough, we need to leave Eastmere. This isn't just about his life. There's more at stake than you know. Father Brannan's gaze shifted between them, his brow furrowed with concern. What are you mixed up in this time, Anna? Anna hesitated for a moment, glancing at Eldrin before replying. It's bigger than anything we've dealt with before, Brannan. There are people who want to erase everything we know. Dangerous people. Father Brannan's expression darkened, but he didn't press for details. Rest, then, he said softly. Looking at your friend, we'll speak more in the morning. As Eldrin's exhaustion finally caught up with him, he felt his body relax against the pew. His mind, though still racing, began to quiet as the warmth of the church and the dull hum of Father Brannan's magic eased him into a restless sleep. But even in the sanctuary of the church, he knew that this respite was temporary. The danger was far from over. Anna sighed, glancing at Eldrin's pale face as his breathing steadied. Look at him. He was in such a rush, and he just falls asleep, she grumbled softly, though her voice carried an edge of concern. Ruck, always alert, peered up from the shadows near the door, his goblin eyes gleaming with worry. Bad people outside still, he whispered, shifting uncomfortably. Ruck doesn't like it. They'll come back. Anna nodded grimly, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. I'll take the first watch. We're not out of this yet. Father Brannan, wiping his brow, gave her a knowing look. The walls of this church have seen many troubled souls seek refuge, Anna. I'll keep an eye on the door. You both get some rest. Anna started to relax, but then, from the far end of the church, the soft creak of a door opening echoed through the sanctuary. Ruck froze, his ears twitching. Anna's hand went instinctively to her sword as the dim light flickered across the walls. A cold wind swept through the sanctuary, making the candles flicker ominously. From the shadows a figure emerged, cloaked, tall and silent. The air around them seemed to grow colder, and the figure's presence filled the space with a suffocating menace. Who are you? Anna demanded, stepping protectively in front of Eldrin, her voice a low growl. The figure paused in the shadows, their face obscured by the hood. The voice that followed was a low, chilling whisper, more like a breath of wind than human speech. I've come for him. Anna's pulse quickened. She tightened her grip on her sword, her eyes darting toward the sleeping Eldrin, then back to the intruder. The Adventures of Eldrin is an independent product published under the Shadowdark RPG third-party license and is not affiliated with the Arcane Library LLC. Shadowdark RPG, TAT 2023, the Arcane Library LLC.